If you're like us, always trying to get beneath the surface of the headlines, well, today's deep dive is definitely going to make you rethink a threat many of us thought we understood. We're kicking off with a headline that, honestly, it really made me pause when I first saw it. Child dies from complication of measles contracted years earlier.
Yeah.
Just that phrase, years earlier, it immediately sparks this mix of curiosity and, frankly, real unease. How can something we often dismiss as a childhood illness just lie dormant, only to come back with such devastating results? So today we're going way beyond just that headline. We're going to really dig into a truly devastating story out of Los Angeles County. It's a real-world tragedy, and it brings this rare but almost always fatal measles complication right into focus. Our mission here is to unpack the why behind it all. How does this happen? And crucially, how does this one heartbreaking story connect to the bigger, concerning trends we're seeing in public health right now? We want to take this news item and really build it into a fuller understanding of the silent dangers this virus still poses. It's about moving past just the surface level. For those of you really trying to track these shifts in public health, today is more than just a headline. It's about uncovering a hidden side of viral threats, showing how measles can cast this long, long shadow. It might really change how you think about what it means to truly beat a disease. Right, so let's start with that AP report from LA County. It details this tragic death of a school-age child. But the key thing here, the really shocking part, is this wasn't right after they got measles. This was a complication that showed up years later, long after everyone thought the initial illness was over. The report itself, it used this really chilling phrase. A school-age child has died from a rare complication of measles contracted in infancy, Los Angeles County health officials said Thursday. It's not just a statistic, is it? It's this stark reminder of how sometimes these viruses can just embed themselves deep inside and wait years before showing their full devastating impact. It's like a ghost from the past tragically coming back. It really highlights these long-term impacts of infections we thought were resolved.
That's precisely it. And the specific condition, the horrifying thing responsible here is called Subacute Sclerosing Panencephalitis, or SSPE for short. Okay, so SSPE. It's an incurable brain disorder. It's progressive, meaning it gets worse over time, and it essentially just systematically dismantles neurological function. But what makes it so particularly cruel, really terrifying, is the timeline. It's incredibly insidious. Unlike the complications you might see during or right after a measles infection, SSPE usually pops up anywhere from 2 to even 10 years after the person first had measles. So, the patient often seems perfectly fine, fully recovered, living a normal life for years. And then the first subtle symptoms start. It really is like a ticking time bomb, a delayed consequence, just waiting. And once SSPE is diagnosed, the outlook is, well, it's incredibly grim. It's nearly always fatal. Death typically comes within 1 to 3 years after symptoms begin. The way the disease progresses is just devastating. It's this gradual, relentless deterioration of almost all neurological functions. We're talking, maybe subtle mood changes at first or slight problems with coordination.
But then it moves quickly. Severe mobility issues, muscle spasms you can't control, really bad seizures, vision loss, and eventually profound dementia. It's just a cruel illness. It relentlessly strips away everything: abilities, personality, and ultimately life itself. And the fact that it's irreversible, untreatable, that's what makes SSPE one of the absolute most feared complications of measles.
And the story gets even more tragic when you focus on when this child was initially infected. The report says in infancy. That just suggests this terrible vulnerability, doesn't it? Like there was no way to avoid it.
Absolutely. That detail is so important. The sources are clear. Infected as an infant, described specifically as too young to be vaccinated, unquote. And this is critical because the standard recommendation for that first dose of the MMR vaccine, the one that protects against measles, it's usually given between 12 and 15 months old. So there's this window. For babies, there's a period where they haven't had the shot yet. They're completely reliant on the immunity of people around them. This child, through absolutely no fault of their own or their parents, was just completely vulnerable when they encountered the measles virus. Dr. Muntu Davis, the LA County health officer, he put it really poignantly. He said, "This case is a painful reminder of how dangerous measles can be, especially for our most vulnerable community members." It just really drives home the awful impact of getting exposed so early during such a crucial developmental time. This isn't just data. It's a human tragedy rooted in a preventable disease.
Okay, that brings up a really immediate question, I think. How rare is SSPE? Because if it's this bad, that's insidious. You'd really hope the odds are incredibly low.
Yeah, that's a natural and important question. And SSPE is rare. But the rarity really depends on one critical factor: how old you are when you first get measles. So for the general population, if someone gets measles, the risk of developing SSPE later is about 1 in 10,000. Now, 1 in 10,000 sounds pretty small, right? But think about how fast measles can spread in communities without good vaccination coverage. Even that small risk can mean multiple tragic cases in a large outbreak. But here's the really crucial part, the part that makes this particular LA case even more heartbreaking. For infants, babies infected before they're old enough for the vaccine, that risk skyrockets. It jumps to an alarming 1 in 600.
Wow, 1 in 600, that's a huge difference.
It's massive. We're talking about a roughly 16-fold increase in risk compared to older kids or adults. And this much higher risk in infants, it's thought to be linked directly to their immune systems, which are still developing, right? They're just not as strong or mature yet. So when these tiny, vulnerable bodies get hit with such a powerful virus so early on, the consequences can be much more severe, much more long-lasting. It increases the chance the virus kind of sets up shop in a way that leads to SSPE down the road. For parents of babies too young for the vaccine, that 1 in 600 statistic really has to underscore the intense vulnerability. It shows that measles isn't just about a week of feeling sick. It's about a risk that can follow them silently for years with potentially fatal results. It really brings home that idea of the silent, lurking shadow this virus can cast. It makes preventing that initial infection just absolutely paramount.
That idea of a silent shadow is really sticking with me. It's unsettling. We tend to think of measles, rash, fever, you get over it, maybe you feel rough for a bit, but that's it. But hearing about SSPE completely changes that picture.
So, okay, let's unpack the virus itself a bit more. What is measles, and how is it capable of doing this, causing these delayed severe problems? What makes it so dangerous?
Right. So measles is caused by the Rubella virus. And yeah, it's much more than just the rash we all picture. It's a viral infection, highly contagious, and it comes with those classic symptoms. High fever, that persistent cough, runny nose, red watery eyes, and then that distinctive rash that usually starts on the face and spreads down. But its real danger, what really sets it apart, is just how incredibly contagious it is. Scientific American had a statistic that just jumps out. One infected person infects 15 more people on average.
15? That's huge compared to something like the flu, right?
Exactly. Orders of magnitude more. Seasonal flu might be, 2 or 3 people infected per case? Measles is way, way beyond that. And it's not just about being close to someone. The virus itself is really hardy. Those tiny viral particles, the ones that come out when someone coughs or sneezes, the source mentions they can linger in a room for hours after the infected person has left. Hours.
Wow. So you don't even have to be there at the same time.
Precisely. Imagine an unvaccinated child walking into, say, a doctor's waiting room or a classroom hours after someone with measles was there. They could breathe it in without ever seeing the infected person. It just shows how easily measles can tear through a community, especially if vaccination levels aren't high enough. It's a viral force that doesn't need much of an opening to spread.
Okay, that contagiousness is one thing, but then for it to go on this stealth mission for years leading to SSPE, that's just mind-boggling. How does it do that? How does it hide in the brain?
It really is one of the most chilling things about this virus. The science behind SSPE is fascinating and deeply concerning. What seems to happen is that after the initial measles infection, the virus doesn't always get completely cleared out by the immune system. Not in everyone. These rare SSPE cases, it looks like the virus mutates slightly. It becomes this kind of altered, maybe defective form. And this altered virus manages to somehow evade the full force of the immune system. It finds a way to hide in the brain, setting up this silent long-term residence inside brain cells, particularly neurons. It's not really replicating like crazy, not causing immediate sickness. It's more like this tiny hidden sleeper agent. Then slowly, over years, remember, 2 to 10 years later, this dormant virus starts causing cumulative damage. It just hangs around, maybe replicating at a very low level, and eventually starts destroying those critical neurons. And the result is that progressive, irreversible neurological decline we see in SSPE, which tragically just leads to total system failure. And the lack of treatment is just brutal. Walter Ornstein, an epidemiologist, professor emeritus at Emory, he was quoted in Scientific American saying, "It's just a virus that goes unchecked and destroys brain tissue, and we have no therapy for it."
No therapy at all.
None. There's no way to stop it once it starts. Dr. Paul Offit at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, he actually had measles himself back in the 50s. He's seen maybe 5 or 10 cases of SSPE in his career. His statement was utterly definitive. Children who suffer from this will always die.
Always die. That's incredibly stark.
It leaves no room for doubt, does it? It just profoundly underscores why preventing that initial measles infection is everything. Because once this particular pathway gets set in motion, there's just no going back.
SSPE alone is terrifying enough, but it makes me wonder, If measles can hide like that for years, does it have other sneaky ways of messing with our health long term? Are there other dangers beyond the obvious symptoms, beyond even SSPE?
That's a really sharp question. And unfortunately, yeah, the answer is yes. Measles has other tricks up its sleeve, other dangerous complications. They might not be as delayed as SSPE, but they go way beyond just the rash and are often overlooked. So besides SSPE, measles can also cause acute encephalitis. That's brain inflammation, but it happens much faster, closer to the initial infection. This occurs in about 1 out of every 1,000 people who get measles. And it's different from SSPE here. The virus seems to trigger the immune system itself to attack a protein in certain brain cells. It causes this severe brain inflammation.
And how serious is that?
Very serious. About 1 in 5 people who get measles encephalitis die from it. And those who survive can be left with permanent brain damage, things like intellectual disabilities, deafness, or epilepsy. So yeah, SSPE is slow, but this acute encephalitis is like a sudden devastating fire. And then there's something else really fascinating and quite concerning that scientists call immune amnesia.
Immune amnesia? What's that?
It seems the measles virus specifically targets and attacks the immune system's B cells. These B cells are crucial. They're like the memory bank of our immune system. They remember germs we've fought off before, so we can fight them faster next time. When measles damages these cells, it essentially wipes out part of that immune memory. It leads to reduced immunity to other diseases.
You mean you get measles and then you're more likely to get other infections?
Exactly. Some research suggests this effect can last for a couple of years. So someone recovers from measles, but then they become more susceptible to things like the flu or pneumonia or other common bugs that their body previously knew how to handle.
Wow, it's like it resets part of your immune system's memory.
That's a good way to put it. So when we talk about preventing measles, it's not just about stopping one illness. It's about protecting the integrity of your entire immune defense system for years down the line. It makes widespread prevention just absolutely critical, not just for immediate health, but for long-term resilience against all sorts of other infections. That idea, a single childhood illness potentially wiping out years of immune memory, it's a pretty profound insight into just how dangerous measles really is in multiple ways.
Okay, so given these absolutely horrific long-term consequences like SSPE and these other serious issues like immune amnesia, you'd really hope we had this virus completely locked down, like relegated to history. But the sources we looked at paint a very, very different picture, an alarming one. Let's shift now to the bigger picture of measles in the U.S. What are the numbers actually telling us right now?
Yeah, the numbers are stark, and they definitely represent a significant step backward for public health. It's been reported as, quote, the worst year for measles in the U.S. in more than 3 decades.
3 decades. For a disease we supposedly eliminated back in 2000.
Exactly. That's what makes it so concerning. Elimination doesn't mean eradication. The virus is still out there globally. But seeing this kind of resurgence domestically is, well, it's a crisis. The CDC confirmed 1,454 cases as of early September. The Washington Post gave a bit more detail, 1,433 cases across 41 states, plus another 21 cases in international visitors found here.
41 states, so it's widespread.
Very widespread. This isn't just a small blip. The U.S. literally saw its largest single measles outbreak since the disease was declared eliminated in 2000. That signals a serious erosion of the progress we made. It means measles isn't just back. It's back with a vengeance we haven't seen in a generation. It tells us that our collective protection has weakened, allowing this incredibly contagious virus to find footholds and spread again.
The largest outbreak since elimination. That really puts the LA child's death into a much broader and frankly scarier context. What's been the human cost of these outbreaks across the country? Beyond just the case counts, what are the impacts?
The human cost goes way beyond the numbers. It's about real suffering, real strain on families and our healthcare system. Nationally, tragically, 3 people have died from measles complications this year. And, as Scientific American pointed out, the death of the child in LA marks the first death of a child from measles in the U.S. in 22 years.
22 years without a child dying from measles. Until now.
Right. That specific detail just hits hard. It shows how serious the current situation is and the potential for worse outcomes if things don't change. And beyond deaths, the burden is huge. Of all the people infected this year, 12%, a significant chunk, needed to be hospitalized.
12% hospitalized. That sounds high.
It is. Yeah. Measles can lead to really serious things like pneumonia, severe dehydration, that encephalitis we talked about, things that require intensive medical care, sometimes for a long time. That puts immense pressure on hospitals, right? Divert staff, beds, resources, and it hits vulnerable groups hardest. The Washington Post noted that 404 of those cases involved children younger than 5.
The exact group most at risk for severe outcomes and often too young to be fully vaccinated.
Precisely. They're completely dependent on the immunity around them. And geographically, we're seeing hotspots linked to lower vaccination. Reuters mentioned Texas and New Mexico driving a January surge due to declining vaccination rates among children. Kansas and Oklahoma were also highlighted. Even LA County itself, where the tragedy occurred, they've had 8 cases of measles in individuals who were in Los Angeles County while infectious. Recently, some residents, some visitors. It just shows this isn't isolated. Because it's so contagious, even a few cases can cause chaos, school closures, hospital surges, disrupting daily life, hitting the economy. It's a stark reminder this isn't abstract. It has painful, real-world consequences.
So we're seeing this unprecedented rise in cases, severe complications, even deaths, for a disease we thought we'd basically conquered. It's deeply concerning. What's the root cause? What's driving this alarming resurgence? Where did things go wrong?
It's a crucial question, and the sources are incredibly consistent on this. The primary driver is fundamentally childhood vaccination rates decline. That's the critical factor fueling these outbreaks. The Washington Post had a staggering statistic. 92% of cases occurred among unvaccinated people or those with unknown vaccination status.
92%. Wow. That's almost everybody getting sick is unvaccinated.
It's an incredibly powerful number. It shows an almost direct correlation, doesn't it? Where vaccination rates fall, measles cases inevitably rise. It's not complex, it's cause and effect. The vaccine works extremely well, so the vast majority getting sick are those without its protection. And these declining rates, they don't just put individuals at risk, they create these pockets of vulnerability in communities. When you get enough unvaccinated people clustered together, maybe in a school, a neighborhood, whatever the virus finds easy targets, it can take hold, spread like wildfire among those susceptible people, and boom, you have an outbreak. There was even that worrying NIH finding, mentioned by the Post, about a recent surge in SSPE cases in developed countries, which researchers linked directly to a reduction in vaccinations.
So fewer vaccinations are potentially leading to more of that horrific SSPE complication, too.
That's what the research suggests. It connects the dots directly. It really forces the question, doesn't it? What is driving these declining rates? What's making parents hesitate or communities forego this vital protection? Understanding that is surely the first step toward fixing this, and it leads us right to the solution, really.
Okay, so if falling vaccination rates are the core problem, then the solution seems, well, pretty obvious, right? It must be the vaccine itself. Let's talk about the MMR vaccine. How good is it, really? How safe? And what kind of impact has it had historically?
Absolutely. The MMR vaccine, that's measles, mumps, and rubella, it's our absolute best weapon against this. Yeah. It's been studied inside and out. It's incredibly safe and incredibly effective. According to AP News, it's 97% effective at preventing measles after 2 doses. That's phenomenal protection.
97% after 2 doses.
Right. And even just 1 dose, Scientific American notes, provides 93% effective at protection against infection. These are really high numbers for any vaccine. It shows how well it works. The schedule is pretty standard, refined over decades. First dose usually between 12 and 15 months old, then a crucial second dose between 4 and 6 years old. That builds really strong, lasting immunity. And here's a critically important point about SSPE, the one we keep coming back to. The NIH states clearly, there is no risk of contracting SSPE after vaccination because researchers have found that SSPE requires a direct measles infection to occur.
Okay, that's huge. So the vaccine protects you from measles and eliminates the risk of getting SSPE from the vaccine itself.
Correct. Getting the vaccine gives you the protection without any risk of developing that horrifying delayed complication later. It's a massive win. And just think historically, before the vaccine became common around 1963, measles used to infect 3 million to 4 million people in the nation every year.
3 to 4 million every year.
Every single year. It wasn't just common, it was practically universal. So the vaccine, it represents this monumental public health victory, stopping that massive wave of infection, protecting against the immediate illness and these devastating delayed effects like SSPE. It's truly one of modern medicine's greatest achievements.
That history is powerful, a true game changer. But vaccination isn't just about protecting yourself, is it? There's this bigger picture, this community aspect. Can you break down that concept of community immunity or herd immunity and why it's so vital, especially thinking about that poor child in LA?
This really gets to the heart of our collective responsibility, and it's so important to grasp. You're exactly right. Vaccination is way bigger than just personal health. That's where community immunity or herd immunity comes in. It's basically this protective shield that vaccination provides for people who can't get vaccinated themselves. Think about infants. like the child in LA, too young for their first dose, or people with weakened immune systems maybe undergoing chemo, or with certain health conditions. They can't rely on the vaccine correctly. But when a very high percentage of the population is immunized, it makes it really, really hard for a contagious disease like measles to spread. There just aren't enough susceptible people for it to jump between easily. So it effectively protects the most vulnerable among us, those who have no other way to defend themselves. Dr. Muntu Davis, the LA health officer, he put it really well in the context of this tragedy. His words really capture it. Infants too young to be vaccinated rely on all of us to help protect them through community immunity. Vaccination is not just about protecting yourself, it's about protecting your family, your neighbors, and especially children who are too young to be vaccinated.
It's not just about me, it's about we.
Exactly. And it's not just a nice idea, it's science. Scientific American specifies the threshold needed for measles. At least 95% of a population must be vaccinated to really stop the spread and protect those who can't get the shot.
95%. That's the magic number for measles.
That's the number science tells us we need for that strong protective barrier, that invisible shield. So yeah, understanding community immunity means recognizing the ethics here. It's a potent reminder that our individual choices have ripple effects, impacting the health and safety of everyone, especially the most vulnerable. It really is a collective responsibility.
Okay, if that 95% threshold and community immunity are so critical, what happens when policies actually move away from encouraging or requiring vaccination? Some of the sources mention policy shifts. What are the potential real-world consequences there?
Yeah, that's where things get concerning from a public health perspective. Policy choices have direct impacts. The Washington Post highlighted a pretty major example. Florida recently became the first state to end all state vaccine mandates, including for children to attend schools.
And all state mandates,
No.
including for school.
That's what the source reported. It's a significant departure from longstanding public health practice in the U.S. And the reaction from experts cited was, well, apprehensive. The article quoted one public health expert who predicted this move is likely to have catastrophic results.
Catastrophic, that's strong language.
It is. And the potential impact on community immunity is pretty straightforward, epidemiologically speaking. When you lower the overall vaccination rate, even by a few percentage points, you start weakening that 95% shield we talked about. You create larger groups of susceptible people. You basically open more doors for viruses like measles to get back in, start transmission chains, and ignite outbreaks. It gives the virus more chances to find vulnerable hosts, infants, the immunocompromised, directly increasing their risk. It's not theoretical. We see it happen. It shows how policy decisions, whatever the motivation behind them, can directly impact public health outcomes, potentially rolling back decades of progress and allowing preventable diseases and their complications back into our communities. It's a very delicate balance, and shifts like that definitely introduce significant risk. #VV. Addressing misinformation.
It seems overwhelmingly clear from everything we've discussed, the science on vaccines is strong, the dangers of measles, including these horrific delayed effects, are very real, and yet, despite that solid consensus, we're seeing vaccination rates fall and the disease roaring back. That contradiction screams that there must be significant misinformation muddying the waters, right?
Yeah.
Actively working against public health.
You've hit on a critical piece of the puzzle there, absolutely. The Washington Post specifically mentioned misconceptions about the vaccine and virus amplified by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and other prominent health influencers. This amplification, spreading inaccurate or fear-based information, it's a major factor, maybe the major factor driving this trend.
So it's not just lack of information, it's active misinformation being spread.
Exactly. When people are bombarded with misleading or just plain false claims about vaccine safety, about how effective they are, or even downplaying how serious measles is, it breeds doubt. It fosters hesitancy, distrust in established science, in public health bodies, and that directly leads to fewer people getting vaccinated, creating those vulnerable pockets we talked about, which then fuels the rise in cases and tragically increases the odds of things like SSPE. It's become as much an information crisis as a public health one. People get hesitant, maybe avoid reliable sources, and latch onto these alternative, often dangerous narratives.
Which makes it so important for us right here to tackle some of that misinformation head on. Based on the sources, what specific incorrect claims are out there that we really need to address and be ready to counter?
That's crucial, empowering people with accurate facts. One really specific and frankly dangerous piece of misinformation called out directly in Scientific American relates to treatment. The article explicitly states, contrary to claims by Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr., measles cannot be treated by vitamin A or cod liver oil.
Okay, so claims that you can just treat measles with vitamins. Flat out wrong.
Flat out wrong, according to the source. And relying on unproven things like that is dangerous because it can give people a false sense of security. They might delay seeking actual medical care, thinking they're treating it, which can lead to much worse outcomes, more complications, hospitalizations, even death, especially for kids or vulnerable adults. And beyond that specific example, there's a whole ecosystem of misinformation, isn't there? A lot of it involves recycling old debunked myths, like the completely discredited link between the MMR vaccine and autism based on fraudulent research, but it just keeps getting amplified.
No one just won't die, will it?
It seems not. Then there's the idea that getting the disease itself gives you better or natural immunity than the vaccine. That completely ignores the potentially devastating price you might pay for that natural immunity, like, encephalitis, immune amnesia, or even death. Getting sick isn't a benign path to immunity. And another common one is arguing that measles is so rare now, why bother vaccinating? That totally misses the point about how fragile herd immunity is and how easily the virus can come back from imported cases if our defenses are down, which is exactly what we're seeing. The bottom line, the clear scientific consensus from all the sources is unwavering. There is no cure or treatment for the disease beyond treatment of symptoms. For measles, the only effective weapon we have is widespread vaccination. It just hammers home why we absolutely must rely on solid medical science for public health decisions, especially with diseases this contagious, this capable of causing such terrible, untreatable, delayed harm like SSPE. The stakes are just far too high for anything less. Clear, accurate information really is our best defense against this silent, lingering threat.
Wow. This deep dive has really peeled back the layers on a threat many of us thought we knew. We started with that single heartbreaking story from Los Angeles, a child dying from SSPE, years after having measles as a baby. It just vividly illustrated the silent, delayed danger this virus holds. We dug into the science, how measles can hide, cause SSPE, acute brain inflammation, even that disturbing immune amnesia. Then we connected that individual tragedy to the bigger picture, this alarming national resurgence of measles, clearly linked to falling vaccination rates. And finally, we came back to the solution. The incredible power of the MMR vaccine and the vital importance of community immunity, that collective shield, while also acknowledging the damaging role of misinformation. What really stands out today isn't just the disease itself, but those invisible connections. How our individual choices about vaccination ripple out, directly impacting the health of the entire community, especially those who are most vulnerable, who rely on the rest of us. The idea that an infection from years ago can silently lead to such a devastating end forces us to really think about that collective responsibility. So for you listening, knowing now about this silent threat, its long shadow, its reliance on gaps in our community shield, what specific action or maybe shift in perspective does this demand from us collectively, understanding the full long-term impact of measles?